use them here at PHW. And then I'm going to do a quick overview of all the measures, and then we'll move into the more technical pieces of the measures. Let me click the button off my screen. Okay, so first off, we'll start with the HEDIS overview. You can move to the next slide, please. Next. Okay, so HEDIS is an acronym. It stands for Healthcare Effectiveness and Data Information Set. All you need to know is the word HEDIS. Next. So what is HEDIS? It's a comprehensive set of standardized performance measures. The measure steward is the National Committee for Quality Assurance, otherwise known as NCQA. The reason we have HEDIS, it was developed to provide consumers with the information they need for reliable comparison of health plan performance. And you'll see that there are quite a few measures within this standard set, and we'll walk through those in the next few slides. Okay, so the HEDIS measure set has several sets on the outside ring here. We have effectiveness of care, access and availability, experience of care, which is our member surveys, utilization and risk adjusted measures, health plan descriptive information, and measures collected using the ECDS. So with those measures, they're in a separate manual all by themselves because, as we know, the HEDIS measures, I'm sorry, I have to go on mute for a second until my dog takes a break. Okay, so the long-term services and supports measures are very important. They have their own manual of specifications. It's a pretty lengthy document, and it gives us all we need to know how to collect, report, and analyze those measures. So you see the specific measures for LTSS. There are 4 of them. We speak in acronyms and letters. So the first one is Comprehensive Assessment and Update, LTSS-CAU, Comprehensive Care Plan and Update, LTSS-CPU, Reassessment and Care Plan Update after inpatient discharge, LTSS-RAC, and then Shared Care Plan with Primary Care Practitioner, and that's LTSS-SPC. Okay, move to the next slide. Okay, this is how we use HEDIS. It's used by more than 90% of the health plans in the country, and that's why it helps us make reliable and valid comparisons against other plans because it's a standardized measure set. It also helps us determine where to focus performance improvement efforts. I'll show you how we do that when I show you some rates in a little bit. Next slide. Okay, so what do the HEDIS scores tell us? They reflect the quality of care provided. They allow for the true comparison of performance across the board, what I call apples to apples. And it also helps us determine how we educate and manage our provider network and our members. Okay, next slide, please. Why is it important? Next. Okay, there's a couple things here. I'll just run through them real briefly. You'll have this deck as a reference, but again, it allows apples to apples comparison, provides an indication of quality of care to our members. It identifies members with condition and age-specific criteria, provides organizations with the ability to identify opportunities for improvement and act on those. And the HEDIS LTSS measures specifically, they provide an indication of the completeness of the documentation of the care plans, assessments, and all the items that require for the coordination of care for our participants. Okay, so that's a lot of information background. So hopefully you just need to understand the basics. What HEDIS is, it's a set of measures, and now we're going to look through the measures independently. So next slide, please. Okay, here are the 4 measures again. Next slide. Okay, so all the measures have core elements, CAU, CPU, and RAC. So that's and the core elements are key components of 3 of the LTSS measures, CAU, CPU, and the RAC. What's really important for everyone to understand is that to be compliant for the measure, the participant's assessment must include all 9 core elements listed in the measure specifications, and we'll talk about each of those as we move through. Same thing with CPU. The care plan must have all 9 core elements listed in the measure specifications. And then for the RAC, this is the reassessment and care plan after inpatient discharge. Again, we see that you must have 9 core elements from the CAU measure and then the 9 core elements from the CPU measure. So hoping that you're getting an indication and understanding that these measures, the core measures, are key components to the measure itself. Okay, next measure. So CAU and CPU have supplemental elements. And those are another set of elements for the measure. So for the comprehensive assessment and update measure, the CAU measure, you have to have 12 of the 19 supplemental elements documented to be compliant for the measure. For the CPU measure, you have to have 4 of the 8 supplemental elements listed in the specifications. Don't worry too much about this. It's more detailed within the slides, but this is just to put the core and supplemental element requirements in your brain as we move through the training. Okay, next slide. Okay, really busy slide. This is the LTSS Comprehensive Assessment and Update Measure. What we've done for all the measures is put this in a document. We call it the LTSS Measures at a Glance. We will be providing this document to you. It's kind of like a little check sheet to make sure you can tick off all the items on the list so that you can get full credit for your measures. So for each one, I'm not going to walk through it in detail because we're going to do that later. But first of all, you see the measure description, really important. So the percentage of LTSS-CHC participants who have documentation of a comprehensive LTSS assessment in a specified time frame that includes documentation of core and supplemental elements. So here we have the core and supplemental elements. So for this measure, there are 2 rates: the assessment of core and the assessment of supplemental elements. And you'll see in here, we highlighted how many you need to be compliant for each one. The next column over, we have the core elements. So here are the 9 core elements that you have to document. All 9, you see all 9 are required for compliance. We move over to the supplemental elements, and the specifications say 12 of 19 required for compliance. So on this list of 19, you need to make sure that you have at least 12 documented for the assessment and update. Okay, we can move to the next slide. Okay, this is the same setup for the CPU measure. You can move to the next page. And for SCP, the SCP measure is very different from the others. The other 3 measures are looking for assessments and updates and care plans. The shared care plan measure is the measure that it looks for documentation that we uploaded the care plan or emailed, put it out on the provider portal, but somehow shared the care plan with the participant's primary care provider. I have the definition here of what means transmitted. The HEDIS operations team that abstracts the data, this is a piece of data that they collect. You don't have to share the entire care plan, but we have done as a matter of routine, so that's not really an issue here. So that's it with that measure. It's a relatively simple measure. We just need to show proof that we uploaded the care plan. Okay, next slide. Okay, and this is the RAC measure, reassessment and care plan update after inpatient discharge. So again, measure description, core elements, supplemental elements. And again, this will be a kind of like a little job aid for you all that we'll provide when we send out the slides. One thing that we will ingrain over and over during the training is that for the supplemental elements are required to totally complete the measure. The supplemental elements cannot be considered compliant unless all the core elements are completed. So the supplemental element is really reliant on the core elements. It's a really key point. So if you're running short on time or you don't think you're going to make it on time, focus all efforts on your core elements. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to run through these relatively quickly, Olivia, because it's probably at a detail level we don't need at this point, and they can always go back and review this at another time if they need to know what the structure of a measure really looks like. But if you move to the next slide, just basically numerator, denominator, and rates. I think we probably all know the basic calculations. So I'm going to show you what some of the measures look like to date. So if you move to the next slide, Olivia. Okay, so here we're looking at true data, the LTSS RAC measure, looking denominator, numerator, and how we calculate the rate. So just file that in the back, and you can look at that when the slides come out if you need help with that. Okay, move to the next slide. Okay, now we're going to actually look at the current status of our measures. So if you move to the next slide. Okay, so here are all our measures. You have CAU, CPU, reassessment and care plan, update after inpatient discharge, and you also have the SCP measure. So on an annual basis, Heather's team in HEDIS operations, they collect the data. We report all the measures and the rates to NCQA June 15th each year. So what you're looking at here are the actual measure rates for measurement year 2019 and measurement year 2020. I know the table looks really jumbled. There's a lot of measures and a lot of rates on here, but the most important thing to look at right here is we made some progress from 2019 to 2020, but we are not posting rates as good as the other plans in some areas. So that's why we're doing this training, so that we all can get a better understanding of how we can improve the rates. So based on the results, we've identified opportunities to improve. So with that, why don't we move to the next slide? Okay, so these are our current plans to improve the measures. The first one here is exactly what we're doing today. We're also conducting monthly internal audits on the sample of records that meet the measures. And we're also distributing tools that we've developed as part of a project to assist you all in documenting the required elements. So the crosswalk is one piece, which is basically these slides, and then the LTSS measures at a glance sheet, which I've mentioned before. Okay, so move to the next slide. So real important here is your role in helping us improve the measures. We're a team, and we need to understand the structure and requirements of all the measures. This measure is relatively new to me as well. And I learn something new every time I go through the requirements and the specifications. If you're not clear on what things are, the core element, supplemental element, ask. We need to make sure that we are addressing everything completely, accurately, and timely in order to get the full credit for these measures. So there's no such thing as a stupid question. Please ask questions if you are unsure at any step of the process, because we're all here to help make you succeed. Okay, next slide. Do we have any questions? I know that was a lot of information. And if you don't think of them now, you can, I'll give you my contact information and you can send me an email and we can help answer those questions for you.
I currently have 0 questions in the chat, but I'll keep monitoring.
Okay. Okay. Can move to the next slide. Our purpose and mission here. Okay, so here we go. We're going to launch the first measure. It's LTSS, Comprehensive Assessment and Update. Okay, move to the next slide. Okay, here's the measure in a little different format. So the measure description is the percentage of participants who have documentation of a comprehensive LTSS assessment in a specified time frame that includes documentation of core and supplemental elements. 2 rates are reported. So you have the core elements and the supplemental elements. Here you see core elements, you need 9 of 9, so you have to do them all within 90 days of enrollment for new participants or during the measurement year for established participants. So on the supplemental elements, you'll see here the participants who had a comprehensive LTSS assessment with the 9 core, so here's your base for the measure, 9 core elements, plus at least 12 of the 19 supplemental elements documented. Again, documented within 90 days of enrollment for new and during the measurement year for established. Okay, next slide. Okay. Okay, I'm going to leave you after this slide. One thing that we have in here for each measure are a slide that we call key concepts, really important things to keep in the back of your mind for prioritization of measures and energy. So key concepts, I've said it many times already before this morning. All 9 core elements must be documented to meet compliance for both rates. Exclusions, we are allowed to exclude measures or exclude participants from our denominator. These come from members that could not be contacted for assessment. And in here, it tells you that in order to be added as an exclusion, to be excluded, you have to document 3 attempts. That 3 attempts were made to the participant, the date and mode of each contact. Very important. So if you want that excluded, you need to make sure that documentation is in place. And then we can also exclude any participants that refuse assessment. And I think the biggest issue here is NA is not an acceptable response for any question. We cannot leave anything blank. If it's not applicable, a sentence needs to be put in there to say that it's not applicable to this participant. And I believe there's examples within the training for those sentences or responses that you can put in there so we can exclude. Okay, with that, I will pass this on to Olivia to dive deeper into the measures and where you all can document them and help us get our measure rates up. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'll be with you through the rest of the presentation in case any questions come up.
Great, thank you, Marcy. We do have one question in the chat, and I might as well just get that out of the way. Let's see, I saw one of the earlier slides, a core element that used standardized tool to measure participants' mental health. What standardized tool is this?
Very good question. We are going to get to that. That is a very good question. So I know that you're listening and understanding. So we will talk about that throughout the presentation. We'll show you where to document that, what is considered an appropriate tool, and how to document it completely and fully to meet the element level compliance. So
Great.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I just want to say also that a lot of the questions in the NRI you might recognize from either past roles of yours when you use different assessments or standardized tools that you use. I know we have a couple Stanford standardized tools. We have some mental health standardized tools, behavioral health standardized tools, social isolation, things like that we use a lot of standardized tools, and that seems to be a common theme here with LTSS-HEDIS measures. So a lot of those are already embedded within your NRI, and it may not specifically give the name of the standardized tool. Say if you're using the Stanford standardized tool for social isolation, I don't even know if that's the correct name for it, but just as an example, it won't say that in the questions, but those questions are directly from that standardized tool. So just as a little disclaimer there. Also, I also wanted to say as a disclaimer, a couple slides ago, right here, we said that 90 days, within 90 days of enrollment for new participants. Now that probably sounds like a crazy amount of time right now because we don't really have any timeframes that we follow for 90 days. That doesn't mean that you have 90 days to go out and see your new participants to get that NRI done. That's not what that means. That means that's what HEDIS is looking for. So our CHC contract and agreement with the state may specify something different, but our HEDIS measures give us 90 days. So if you would go out within, say if you went on day 81 to do your MPO with a participant and do that NRI, you would be out of compliance in regards to PHW guidelines and standards and the agreement we have with the state. So I just wanted to put that out there. Don't think we're changing any timelines. What you currently know is your current timeline for MPOs and trigger visits and whatever the case may be, that's what you need to follow. Don't look at these going, oh, I have 90 days to do this. Really, you don't. With our agreement with the state does define something different.
When in doubt, use the most strict standard that you have. That will keep us all safe. And Olivia, one thing we can do is we can make those slides specific to that time frame so it fits, so that there's no confusion. If we want to alleviate that confusion, we can certainly do that as well.
Sure. Yeah, that might be probably best. That'll be one of our edits before we share it. Like I said,
let's do that.
Okay.
Good deal. Thanks.
Sure. Like I said, there's a lot of screenshots that we're going to be going through. Okay. So the left side of the screen, our internal service coordinators are going to be following. And then the right side of the screen is what it's going to look like for our external service coordinators. So left side of the screen of the slide would be your nursing facility documentation, and the right side would be HCBS. So I'm going to go through them pretty quickly because we have 9 core elements to go through, and then we also have, I want to say, 19 supplemental elements to go through. So I'll be passing off the supplemental elements to our service coordination managers to walk through those as well. So first one, we're going to go through the 9 core elements, and the 9 core elements are listed here. I know it does say 90 days of enrollment for new participants during the measurement year. As we know, it's within 5, it's within 60 for an MCO transfer. So just keep those stricter timelines in mind. So we're going to go through how to capture activities of daily living, acute and chronic health conditions, current medications, cognitive functioning using a standardized tool, mental health status using a standardized tool, home safety risks, living arrangement, current and future family, friend, caregivers, and name and contact information for the participants' current, known, and ongoing care providers. So you probably in your head are picturing spots that you know you capture this already. So a lot of this is just going to be sort of a roadmap for you. It's going to be a lot of reading these slides. So like I said, I am going to move pretty quickly through these because these will be provided for you to use as a tool to know where to actually capture this information for HEDIS. Okay, so let's go into ADLs. So the core element number 1 out of 9. So the first one is ADLs. So at least 5 of the following ADLs must be documented: bathing, dressing, eating, transferring, using toilet, and walking. And we know that if we complete that NRI from A to Z, that we're capturing more of those ADLs than 5. But at least 5 of these do have to be captured. Now, like I said, I need to edit these page numbers here on these slides just because we recently released new assessments, but the content is the same. So, you know, capturing the first element out of the 9 core elements for CAU ADLs, you would look in the PCSP. You would also look in the NRI for HCBS. And then you would also look in the HRA. Some of you external service coordinators know that as the DSNP HRA. That's how it's listed in the portal. Okay, core element 2, acute and chronic health conditions. You may document condition names only. Okay, so there's appropriate spots to capture all of this as we're all familiar with. So for nursing facility, we're looking at the PCSP. Also for HCBS, we're looking at the PCSP in the physical health section. The NRI in section I goes through disease diagnosis, and also section J. Also the HRA on the physical health tab goes through the acute and chronic health conditions. Core element 3, current medications. Remember to include dosage and frequency. Okay, so nursing facility will capture those within the PCSP, and HCBS will capture those in the NRI in that section M, in the PCSP as well. Core element 4, assess cognitive functioning using a standardized tool. So also documenting that the participant is too cognitively impaired to self-report on a standardized tool meets the requirements of the element. So if that participant isn't able to be assessed using that standardized tool because they are too cognitively impaired, if you're able to capture that information, that will also meet this element. So you can see here for nursing facility, you'll capture that in the PCSP. And home and community-based will also capture that in the PCSP and the inter-I section C. So here's an example of our standardized tool. Standardized tool is the mini mental that is built into the inter-I. Core element 5, assess mental health status using a standardized tool, and also documenting that the participant is too cognitively impaired to self-report on a standardized tool meets the element. You will capture mental health status in the PCSP and HRA for nursing facility participants, in the inter-I, PCSP, and HRA for HCBS. Core element 6, assess home safety risks. So that would be fall risks, any hazards within the home, crime risk, bathroom safety, chemical hazards. So a standardized tool is not required for this element. Direct observation of home safety risks is not required, but you can make queries about potential home safety risks. So if you're on the phone, because that participant is refusing a face-to-face assessment, questioning them about potential home safety risks does meet the element. And also documenting that there are no home safety risks does also meet the element. So we would capture core element 6 for nursing facilities. We would capture that in the PCSP for living preference and housing. We would also capture it for HCBS and living preference and housing in the PCSP. We would also capture it in the HRA tab 3, so that would be social concerns. And then for HCBS in the Inter-I section Q. And that's the assessment of the environment. Okay, element 7, confirm living arrangements. So where does that participant live? They live in a nursing facility, institution, assisted living, foster care, general community, their home, their daughter's home, whatever the case may be. You're going to capture those living arrangements in the PCSP for both nursing facility and HCBS. The HRA for both nursing facility and HCBS. And the Inter-I section A. That would be questions 12 and 13 with living arrangements. Okay, core element 8, confirm current and future family, friend, caregivers. So for participants who have family and friends, caregivers paid or unpaid who assist them with ADLs, IADLs, healthcare tasks, emotional support, document the caregiver's name and contact information. Documentation that a participant does not have a family, friend, caregiver does meet the element. We will capture caregiver availability for nursing facility in the PCSP. In the HRA for HCBS, we will also use the same section of the PCSP and the HRA, and we will also use the Inter-I section P. That captures informal supports. Just a little plug, we will be doing an informal support, natural support training in the upcoming weeks that is based on OLTL's recent training that they put on a couple weeks ago regarding natural supports, informal supports. So we're going to use that content and hopefully, you know, help you understand informal supports, how to assess informal supports. And we'll make that also available to you if your agencies do not have them. The slides, excuse me. Core element 9, document name and contact information for the participants' current, known, ongoing care providers. All right, so this could be the primary care physician, the home health provider, personal aid, assistance. That could be a direct care worker. It could be an agency model. Physical therapist, occupational therapist, any kind of adult daycare center, respite care, meal delivery, transportation, any kind of specialist that is providing care, any kind of person that is providing care. Documentation that a participant does not have any ongoing care provider does also meet the element. Okay, so you capture that in nursing facilities in the PCSP. Page 11 and 19, and same for HCBS. So you'd be looking at your service plan where you would capture all of those providers and then make sure you get that healthcare provider's, the PCP's name. Also phone number if you're able to get that and if it's different. So HCBS, you will be getting the PCP's name and number. Okay, I have a question in the chat. Do nursing facility caregivers count as paid caregivers? Or is this question specifically friend and family? No, that is nursing facility counts as a paid caregiver. There's current. Okay, so I'm going to move to Sarah. Are you able to get off mute?
Hey, Olivia, it's actually Maria. I'm going to go first, and then I'm going to pass it over to Sarah.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Maria Lovett is our one of our internal service coordination managers, and she's going to go through the first half of the supplemental elements for CAU.
Thanks, Olivia. We could go ahead and move on to the next slide. So this is a little bit of a review of what Marcy and Olivia have already gone over, but I don't think it hurts to review it again. As we've been talking about this CAU measure, comprehensive assessment element, in order to be considered compliant, we have to meet 9 of those core elements and 12 of 19 of those supplemental elements that we're about to go through just now. And that's documented within the 90 days of enrollment for our new participants and during the year for our established participants. So we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. This is just, again, a refresher from what we talked about a little bit earlier. Those requirements that are needed to be met to be considered fully compliant. There are some exclusions that apply. Someone cannot be contacted. If that is the case, we have to make sure that we have documented at least 3 attempts to contact that participant. And another exclusion is that refusal of assessment. Again, making sure that we have documented the attempt and the refusal and the date if that is the case. Again, just to reiterate, NA is not an acceptable answer when it comes to HEDIS requirements. All right, so this is just listing out those 19 supplemental elements that Sarah and I are going to go through. I'm not going to read this entire list here because as we go through, we will read each of them off as we show you where you can find them within the different assessments. So we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. Starting off, our first supplemental element 1, that's documenting the instrumental ADLs, so our IADLs, that at least 4 of the following were assessed. So that could be shopping for groceries, driving or using public transportation, using the phone, cooking or meal prep, housework, home repair, laundry, taking medications, and handling finances. So we are going to move on to the next slide and see where we will document those elements. So for both nursing facility and HCBS, we will document that in the PCSP and the HRA. And in addition, for home and community-based service participants, we will also see that in the Inter-I Section G as well. For supplemental element number 2, documenting the current use of assistive devices or technology to maintain or improve mobility. So some examples would be a wheelchair, walker, scooter, cane, crutches. Documenting that the participant does not use an assistive device or technology does meet this element as well. So just a note on these, assistive devices or technology, we are talking about for mobility only. So like those examples that I gave of a wheelchair or a cane, things like that. So for both nursing facility and HCBS, we are going to find this information within several different sections within the PCSP, as well as tab 7 in the HRA. In addition, for home and community-based services, we will find it in Section G of the Inter-I as well. All right, moving on to supplemental element number 3, assessing the participant's self-reported health status. So this could use a standardized tool or question. So an example, a single question could be, in general, would you say that your health is excellent, very good, good, fair, or poor? We could use the short form survey. We could use the patient reported outcome measurement information system, and also documenting that the participant is too cognitively impaired to self-report on a standardized tool does also meet this element. So we can find this element, self-reported health status, for both HCBS and nursing facility in the PCSP, as well as that global health safety tab 2 in the HRA. In addition, for HCBS, we can find this in Section J of the Inter-I. Moving on to supplemental element number 4, assessing behavioral abnormalities that can result from a cognitive or psychological condition. So some examples, sleep disturbances, wandering, aggression, urinary incontinence, agitation, or delusions. Again, documenting that the participant has no behavior difficulties does meet this element. So we can find this section for both HCBS and the nursing facility in the person-centered service plan, as well as tab 5 in the HRA behavioral health. In addition, for home and community-based services, we can find this information in the cognition section and the mood and behavior section of the InterI. All right, moving on to supplemental element number 5. Assessing the participant's self-reported activation or self-efficacy using a standardized tool. So some examples are the PAM, the Patient Activation Measure, or the CDSM, Stanford Chronic Disease Self-Efficacy Scale. Documenting that the participant is too cognitively impaired to self-report on the standardized tool can also meet this element. All right, so for HCBS and nursing facility, we are going to be inputting this information into a general note. For the nursing facility side of things, there are a few items you're going to see today that this is the first time we're talking about them. So don't worry, you will be receiving a QRG that summarizes these new items for you as well. So you'll have this PowerPoint to refer to as well as that QRG. So again, for this element, we will be documenting using the self-efficacy 6-item scale within a general note in TrueCare. All right, supplemental element 6, documenting vision needs. So this includes whether the participant has impaired vision and uses a device such as contacts, visual aids, special computer software and hardware to address that need. And if you document that the participant does not have impaired vision, that meets this element. So for both HCBS and nursing facility, we are going to find this information in the PCSP as well as the very beginning of the HRA tab 1. In addition, for HCBS, we will find this in the InterI section D, specifically labeled vision. Supplemental element number 7, documenting hearing needs. So this is similar to our vision needs, includes whether the participant has impaired hearing and uses a device such as a hearing aid, specialized computer software, or anything that could help to increase that hearing or communication capacity. Again, documenting that the participant does not have impaired hearing meets this element. Again, very similar sections within the PCSP, HRA, and InterI, you're going to find these items. So for both nursing facility and HCBS, the PCSP and the beginning of the HRA tab 1, the InterI section D, in addition for HCBS participants. And then supplemental element number 8, documenting speech needs. Again, very similar to our vision and hearing needs, includes whether the participant has a speech impairment and uses a device such as a specialized computer. And again, documenting that the participant does not have impaired speech meets this element. HCBS and nursing facility, we will document in both the PCSP and HRA, very similar spots to our hearing and vision needs. And in addition, for HCBS in section D of the InterI, that communication and vision section, excuse me. All right, I believe I am turning it over to Sarah now. Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong and let me know if you're out there.
I am out here. So I will pick up here, supplemental element number 9. So for this one, you'll document whether the participant is receiving physical or occupational therapy, or documenting that they are not receiving physical or occupational therapy. So you will find that, can go to the next slide. For HCBS in the NRI, you can see the highlighted section there, specifically for physical therapy. Right below that is occupational therapy. And then for both nursing facility and HCBS, it will be a general note to answer whether the participant is receiving any of these home health services that are in bold here, or if they are not receiving them, then you do not have to include them in your general note. Okay, supplemental element 10. This one is screening for fall risks or whether the participant has a history of falls or problem with gait or balance. On the other hand, if they do not have any history of falls, then that would meet the element as well if you document as such. For HCBS, you can document in section J on the NRI, and then for both nursing facility and HCBS, you will be documenting in the HRA, tab 7, whether the participant has fallen in the last year. For supplemental element 11, this is assessing the participant's alcohol or other drug use, and this needs to be done using a standardized tool or documenting that the participant is too cognitively impaired to self-report for the standardized tool. So the standardized tool that we're going to use is in the HRA tab 5. So this is for nursing facility and HCBS. So it inquires about alcoholic drinks and illegal drug use. And then in addition for HCBS, there is a section in the NRI section J for the alcohol use. Along those lines, we also have to document whether the participant is a smoker or not. And we will do that in the similar sections. For HCBS, same section J of the NRI, and then same section of the HRA for both nursing facility and HCBS, documenting within the past year how often the participant used tobacco products. For supplemental element 13, this is to document the current or planned use of community, public, or planned resources that address social risk factors. So documenting whether the participant is receiving Medicare in addition to Medicaid, are they receiving food subsidies, housing subsidies, et cetera. I think you went backwards there. All right. So for addressing social risk factors for nursing facility and HCBS, you will do that in the PCSP as well as the HRA. It will be HRA tab 3. And then in addition for HCBS, you will answer that question under current payment sources in the NRI section A. For supplemental element 14, this is going to assess the participant's social support in the community. So are they involved in community center, senior center, faith-based organizations? Do they volunteer? So we're going to find this for both nursing facility and HCBS in the PCSP. And then also in the HRA, it asks questions of whether they volunteer in the community. And then solely for HCBS, it's also documented in the NRI regarding informal helpers. For supplemental element 15, we're going to assess the participant's self-reported social isolation or loneliness. And we're going to do this using a standardized tool. So for HCBS, here to the next slide, please. Yep. Oh, I'm sorry, nursing facility is first. So for nursing facility, it will be in the HRA that one question whether in the past month the participant has been bothered by feeling lonely, but then also the new member contact assessment version 6, it does have a tab for this 3-item loneliness scale, which will meet this supplemental element. And now for HCBS, for this same element for the loneliness, you can go to the next slide. It's going to be documented in the general note, same 3 questions for the loneliness scale, but for HCBS, it's going to be in a general note. And then in addition, it's going to be documented in the NRI under section F for psychosocial well-being. For supplemental element 16, we're going to document cultural and linguistic preferences. So do they have a preferred language or a need for interpreter services? And you can find this for both nursing facility and HCBS in the PCSP, where it asks about the cultural considerations, and in the HRA for both nursing facility and HCBS, where you can document their preferred language. And then solely for HCBS in the NRI, it's going to be section B for the intake. All right, supplemental element 17. So this is in regards to the participant having an advanced care plan. Like, do they have an advanced directive? Do they have a live-in will? Do they have palliative care concerns? So all of this can be documented in the PCSP for both nursing facility and HCBS. So it asks about like the power of attorney, all in the same section, do not resuscitate. And then also for both HCBS and nursing facility, it's in the HRA under life planning. Supplemental element 18, you're going to document the participant's current participation regarding volunteer or work activities. If they are not participating in either of those, you can document that they're not. And then that would also suffice for this element. So you can document that in the PCSP for both nursing facility and HCBS, as well as the HRA under social concerns. And the last of the supplemental elements, number 19, this is in regards to recent use of medical services. So were they hospitalized recently? Did they enter short-term rehab? Do they have skilled home health services? And you can document this in the HRA for both nursing facility and HCBS, or just for HCBS, and or just for HCBS in the NRI section N under treatments and procedures.
Great. That wraps up CAU core and supplemental elements. We do have a couple of questions, and I know Jennifer is going through and helping us answer some of them. I think there's one that I'm not sure on here. The new PCSP does not allow you to document any explanation to vision if you mark no. Is wearing glasses a specialized service? Apologies, but what element or what supplemental element are you referring to? The one for vision, I'm assuming?
Yeah, Maria was talking about it, and like before, like you could answer no, and then you in like the specialized thing, and then you could put in a note that says, but she wears glasses due to whatever, because I don't really classify glasses as a specialized service, right?
Yes. Let me get back to you on that one. I'll get some clarity. I don't know if you can help us with clarity, Marcy, on that.
This is Marcy. Maybe somebody from Heather's team, maybe Lori. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but they do the actual abstraction out of the record. So,
yeah, Marcy, the specs say specifically that we're to document vision needs, including whether the member has impaired vision and uses assistive devices like corrective lenses, visual aids, specialized computer software. So if we're seeing, if you're documenting that the member has glasses, we're going to accept that as, having done that assessment.
So we would mark that as yes, and then put that they wear glasses then.
Yeah, right. And then, sometimes they don't have any needs, right? Like they might not have glasses, they might not have a problem. And I think on the PCSP, you can actually say, member has no needs. That's where the NA is not helpful. It's better if you, in some cases, instead of putting, well, we don't want you to put NA, but in some cases it might be, depending on what it is, like appropriate to say, member does not have vision needs, or member does not have what, such and such needs, rather than just putting NA, because the NA part is, we don't know what that means. Like they weren't asked, they don't, so. But yeah, your glasses, your corrective lenses should be acceptable for that.
Thanks, Lori. Okay, so there's a couple different questions we've identified through doing the work and putting these slides together. We realized that we were not capturing three main elements. So there was the loneliness scale or the social isolation, the self-efficacy scale or the self-activation, And also PT and OT was not being adequately defined. So we have provided for externals a template to copy and paste into a general note for now until you have true care access. So please, if you're confused about those standardized questions that were provided to you, I know Marcus did present them a few training series back. Please ask your leadership. Be happy to provide that again if needed. But your leadership should also have that and should have instructed you on how they would like you to capture that within the general note.
Olivia, this is Laurie again. Can you address the cognitive function? It looked to me like that was just one of those questions on the PCSP that we had discussed, that it's not a standardized tool in the PCSP. I don't know if the new PCSP has a standardized tool or if you're also adding that as a general note.
I believe, well, for the HCBS, it's captured in the NRI. I'm going to have to go back to the cognitive slide.
Right, it's the nursing facility that we were, having trouble capturing that.
Right. Now, Sarah or Maria, is it captured within the HRA?
No, that's actually another supplemental one that we're going to have to add to a general note, but I believe we go into more detail for the CPU section.
Okay.
Okay. So if that's in the note, then that might be something for these CAU slides. You might want to update that because it reflects on these slides that it is captured in the PCSP on whatever page, I can't remember. So, as you do that, that might be something to update as well.
Thanks, Laurie. I'll take a look at that before we get the slide deck out. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining. It looks like you get 4 minutes back to your time slot. Appreciate the great participation within internally and externally. We look forward to speaking on CPU next week. Please encourage the same amount of participation. And like I said, we will get these slides out to you and the quick reference guide a little bit later this week. All right, have a great rest of your day.